And we have two experts with us today that are working on this initiative, and I'll introduce them now. Jocelyn Painter is a PhD student in ecohydrology and watershed science at NC State. She is an Indigenous hydrologist with a BS in biological engineering and interest in climate change and water resources. She's a member of the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska, and her research focuses on understanding the ways that climate change and land use impact environmental resources that have cultural significance for Indigenous peoples. She's also interested in methods of incorporating Indigenous forms of knowledge into environmental science and policy. And Jocelyn explores these research topics using numerical modeling, systematic literature review, and community engagement. And then we have Beth Roach with the Nottoway Indian Tribe of Virginia and the Virginia Council on Environmental Justice. Beth advocates for water and climate justice at the intersection of decolonization and restoration of tribal rights. For over a decade, she has served on the Tribal Council of the Nottoway Indian Tribe of Virginia. For 2 years, Beth chaired the Virginia Council of Environmental Justice, and in 2018, she co-founded the Alliance of Native Seed Keepers, an emerging benefit corporation to protect endangered Indigenous seeds by repatriating them to their ancestral communities and to support Indigenous-led environmental advocacy. In 2020, Beth launched a tribal coastal resilience initiative to implement climate adaptation strategies in Native communities within the shared waters of Virginia and North Carolina. So I'm happy to introduce you to both of these women, and I'll turn it over to you right now.
Hi, June. Say Beth Roach. I'm here with my partner, Jocelyn Painter. We're so excited to be here. Jocelyn's pulling up our screen and PowerPoint, but I'll start to give you an overview of the Tribal Coastal Resilience Connections program that we're so excited about and just really happy to be here. So thanks y'all for having us. And I'm also thrilled, I just want to say Donna Chavis is in the crowd, so I might be asking her to pipe in a few times because just this work relates to her too. So this work began leading up to the engagement with tribes in Atlantic Coast Pipeline. I think that's really a good place to start. This is where this conversations began around. We have these imminent threats, and we have people in tribal communities and councils that are wanting to do more or are needing more education and don't quite know how to do that. And then on the other hand, you have local, state, federal agencies that also have a wide gulf in understanding how to engage with tribal communities and what does that look like too. So this program began as a way to build capacity for tribal communities to be players in the natural resource game with respect to climate adaptation. And it's got a few different partners. And so we have this coastal resilience funding from the EPA. It's been awarded through the Albemarle-Pamlico National Estuary Partnership. Subgranted from those folks are North Carolina State, but Jocelyn is here to describe her research, and also Ryan Emanuel, who I'm sure many of y'all know his name, and we'll be referencing some of his work, as well as William & Mary Virginia Coastal Policy Center. And they are here with me as the Virginia side, really interested in tribal outreach and understanding what this looks like overall. So to start, let's go to the next slide. I want to show y'all who we're working with here. And what does it mean to say, tribal groups and regional efforts? And so it's really tricky. I mean, we have challenges from the get-go, and this is looking back 400 years on the right. This is a map that was created in the 60s, and it's, not perfect maps are a real challenge for us. But you see the groupings of folks that are in this region at the time of contact. And then to the left, this is probably one of the first things Jocelyn and I worked on together, which is to map out where the recognized tribes are in this region. And you can see there's just this, missing area of red on the actual coastal side. Now, we do not have enough time and space, and we're working on this to go over the 400 years of history that made that so. But things that are important for you to know is that, there's contact, and there's of course things that are well-reported, disease and war, but there's also a lot of migration, and a lot of the folks that are on the coastal areas have ended up in other groups, and names have changed. And so this presents a real challenge for, again, any kind of stakeholder group, an agency, a government body, to do meaningful engagement, because the story is just very convoluted, and we are hoping to shed some light on what those challenges are, and also help to describe who all these communities are. So this work is to highlight good work that's being done, bring attention to great examples of coastal resilience and tribal communities throughout Turtle Island, and also to pivot towards what we're going to do in the future to mitigate climate adaptations as much as we can. And so I'm not the scientist, I'm the community organizer, but Jocelyn is our scientist. And so she's going to help us understand how climate crisis really directly impacts our tribal groups, no matter who you are and where you are within our region. So thanks, Jocelyn.
All right, so I'm going to start. Like I was saying, we're going to lead with science and what we know. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about some of the threats that we're looking at due to climate change in North Carolina, and some of the unique implications that poses for tribal communities. So one of the major threats in North Carolina is rising temperatures. And we have an example here from the Lumbee River Basin. And we're looking at, in this figure, is historical and projected average air temperature. So this lighter band is our historical average air temperature, and then the darker band is our projected average air temperature. And these projections come from the RCP 8.5, or the higher emissions scenario. So on the y-axis, we have temperature. On the x-axis, we have time. And what's important for us to take from this figure is that we're seeing the largest difference in air temperature in the summer months. And this has unique implications for tribes, specifically when it comes to our outdoor celebrations like powwows, festivals, and homecomings, things like that. And this is because for tribes, these events and these celebrations, they reinforce and bring together like a sense of community, but they also tie us to our heritage and our history through our elders. And we also know that higher temperatures in summer months is also related to the increased risk of illness and death, especially in vulnerable communities like the elderly, pregnant women, and young children. Another major threat in the Southeast is the increased frequency of extreme precipitation events. So this could lead to the increased frequency of things like urban flooding. But we also know in North Carolina that we also face the threat of major hurricanes, and we're also anticipating an increased frequency of major hurricanes in North Carolina and on the coast in general. So this could also lead to the increased frequency of these devastating floods like we saw in 2016 with Hurricane Matthew, specifically in the Lumbee community in North Carolina. For our coastal communities, we're also facing the threat of sea level rise. This is the Albemarle-Pamlico Peninsula, and in this study, they anticipate that by 2100, the green and red land on this map will be inundated. And for tribal communities specifically, especially those tribes that have ancestral ties to this region, this could mean the inundation of culturally significant and archaeological sites in the region. And when we bring all of these threats together, we're also seeing, sorry, I'm gonna change the format of my thing so I can see the figure. We're also seeing these widespread ecosystem changes. And as an example, we can look at the USDA plant hardiness zone, and you can see on the bottom that this is dictated by the annual average lowest minimum temperature. So on the left, we have the historical classification. And then on the right, again, we have that RCP 8.5, or the higher emissions scenario. So we see that as temperature is rising, these hardiness zones are shifting upward. And for rural communities in North Carolina, that could mean changes in the types of crops that are able to survive and thrive in North Carolina. And for tribal communities, that could also mean changes in the natural habitat ranges of culturally significant or medicinal plants. So it's important for us to understand the threats that we're facing, but we also want to look at how local communities are mitigating those threats. So I'll let Beth talk about those.
All right, now like Jocelyn. So we have a lot going on. We have, increasing temperatures. We have, especially with seed keeping, our cultural significant crops might be creeping upwards, and we need to be able to track that knowledge. But we know we don't want to get too overwhelmed with the scary, because there are a lot of really great things that are happening. And I don't even have a picture for everything that we know of on the slide, but going around the clock, you have oysters from the Nansemond Indian Tribe's Oyster Restoration Project on the Nansemond River, right off the shore of their tribal land. That's a partnership with Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Of course, special shout out to my own tribe, Nottoway, Virginia. For over 10 years, we've been cleaning up this very significant place, Carey's Bridge, on the Nottoway River, in between our former reservation land and close to the tribal center. Over a decade of observations and witnessing the changes in that area have given us enormous knowledge of what threats are existing and how we want to apply those, or work towards solutions for that. So you'll hear more about that as the project goes on. And going around, we have the Chickahominy tribe has been working with their local municipalities to envision what that lower Chickahominy watershed management will look like. Of course, the great Kahari River Initiative, they're our heroes. So I hope that y'all have been following the clearing of log jams that they've done in the Kahari River, and they've been able to do this in a way that has involved intergenerational, folks, and not only are they all in the river working together, but they're always telling stories and infusing their music, and just it's a lovely time. So check them out. We have fish hatcheries in Virginia with the Pamunkey and the Mattaponi, and another slide would show Upper Mattaponi working against water reservoir protections. The Pamunkey also have been working on a living shoreline plan along the reservation edge, and then you have the Monacan, who are working to protect Rossawick, which is their historic capital, from water treatment facility infrastructure that's coming in. One of the other partnerships that we've developed during this program or project timeline so far is with a group called the Climate Service. I'm sure some of y'all have heard about them, but they're working with the Meherrin and the Hallowasaponi to study the asset values of their tribal infrastructure and look at that for the next 80 years and see where are the biggest financial risks, how are the temperatures going to change, what's the flood areas looking like. And for folks like both of them, they have huge powwow events, and like Jocelyn was saying, how are our powwow events going to be in the worst case scenario or the best case scenario, and what can we do in order to make sure that we can still enjoy these things. So there is plenty of good work happening around. What we're hoping to do collectively is to not only highlight these good things that are happening, but create this network so that we're sharing knowledge. One of the most important things for us to do is to be able to understand what's working well in other places, where precedents are being set. Within this slide alone, you've got a mixture of state and federally recognized tribes, and that lends itself to a whole nother can of worms as far as who has to work with them or how hard they can flex. But in order to better understand kind of the foundational sense of what we can work with, Jocelyn has been doing some really neat research on plans from around Turtle Island.
Oops, went too far.
Oops.
Yeah, like Beth was saying, another chunk of knowledge that we're bringing in is this national data set of tribal climate resilience plans. And my job is to take these plans, and what I plan to do is analyze the language in them and see if that can key us in on values that tribal communities hold with natural resources, and also maybe concerns that they have about climate change. So as a little example, generated a word cloud here from this data set of plans. So these are the most frequently used words in the plans, and then the larger the word is, the more frequently it is used. So we have climate change front and center, but we can also see things like wildlife, water, forest, health, fish, and when you think about it, these can be either things that they're concerned about, maybe some knowledge that they're bringing to the table. And if you've had any experience with municipal plans, or you've taken a look at the local resilience planning in your area, if you're seeing maybe some some aspects of these planning efforts that you're not seeing in municipal plans, that's where we hope to hone in on maybe some gaps where we can make recommendations to DEQ in order to make municipal adaptation efforts more inclusive to the values and concerns of tribal communities.
Yeah, thanks, Jocelyn. And, Greg Richardson would be remiss if I didn't also share that, this is housed in the North Carolina Commission on Indian Affairs. And so what we hope is, to be able to use that wide-reaching network of commission staff and subcommittees to, get the word out to tribal communities. But this is a two-way street. Like, we've got to let them know that we exist, but then when we can't do our work unless we learn more from folks as to what they want to see and what we can help them with. And so, we got to, like all y'all, we had to pivot. This program was developed or designed pre-COVID. And so we got it started after everything kind of leveled out in the summer, if you can say that. So what we were hoping was that we were going to have all of these powwows to go to and all these outreach, opportunities at tribal events, but that didn't happen, of course. And so we thought, okay, well, what's a way that we can reach people? And right now, through the internet. So what we're asking is for folks to think about a water story, and it could be so many different things. A favorite memory, a favorite waterway, even though your folks might have migrated in certain places. Some of the images that Jocelyn was showing, especially on the coastal edge, we've got these amazing places that are near and dear to us that we're losing due to erosion, or, up in Nottoway, we've got sand pit removal permits that are threatening archaeological sites. And so not only do we have, a threat of sea level rise coming, but we also have forestation and all these other resources that are, threatening things that we know are important to us. And so what we're trying to do is gather knowledge so that we can understand better how we can address these threats together. And then also, how do we build bridges amongst all the stakeholders that can help drive towards solutions. And so if you would like to see what we've gathered so far, really our presence is on Facebook, Tribal Coastal Resilience Connections. We hope to evolve this, and so please follow along with us. We have some tricks up our sleeves that we hope that we'll be able to roll out hopefully by the end of this year. So this launched in fall, and we still have some work to do. But what we are, hopeful is that we'll be offering a place for not only our tribal communities, but as Jocelyn was describing, for other agencies to reach out to us and to help kind of shepherd these ideas along. So I think we might be ready for questions, and thanks y'all for letting us present.
Thank you. Thank both of you so much for sharing your important work. I don't have any questions yet, but I know, let's see, Donna is with us, Bob Parr is with us. I'm going to start calling names here. And James Smith. I know some of you probably have questions, but I'll start out. I think, what we heard yesterday, and it was on the Frontline panel, I think it was Jordan Revels talking about stopping the bad and building the good. And it's clear that, your story is one of doing that. And it's really powerful that the Indigenous people in Eastern North Carolina are a big part of the solution on what's happening there. And it's a great model for North Carolina. So we're really glad that you shared it. Again, I took notes. As a matter of fact, I think it was 30 years I was at a Halawassaponi powwow way back in the day. So it's really nice to hear that you're working with those folks up there. All right, Donna, are you still with us? Any thoughts?
Actually, I was trying to type in my question.
Oh, okay. Just go for it.
Actually, I'm so glad to hear about your efforts in terms of mentioning DEQ and working with them on how they can, in their municipal adaptation, how they can integrate more of the Indigenous voices and ways. And Indigenous peoples have always had to be adaptive. Do you see that the work of the sort of integration you're talking about as being one of the major pieces that we have to bring forward, so that not only are means of dealing with the changes found, but that they're found in a way that is culturally, that works culturally with these communities. I'm excited to hear about that work in terms of with DEQ. And I don't know if that was it, North Carolina DEQ or Virginia DEQ, but either one is good.
Yeah, Donna, they're very different. Either, I tell people now it's it's different being for me Nottoway in North Carolina versus Nottoway in Virginia. And, I think that part of that has to do with, like the Commission on Indian Affairs exists in Carolina. And of course, nothing is ever perfect, but there is this body that has a relationship with DEQ and all other branches, which is fascinating and amazing. But Donna, you know as well as I do that we need to organize voices within our communities in order to put pressure on our leaders and to drive those issues up. And so, I see it as a multi-pronged effort where we hope that, people are thinking about water stories and such and start to put their minds around what it is that, put language around and some structure around what we're seeing, and then be able to take that to our councils internally, and then they can go, that route. And also, DEQ on both sides need to understand how to work with tribal communities. We can't wait for our people to put that effort up. Like, we need to have better policies and engagement on the state side. And so you have at least some of those arms in Carolina. Now in Virginia, we have our Virginia Council on Indians was disbanded in 2012, and we've had some shaky attempts to get that back together. And we also have predominantly now, as of the past few years, federal.
Hopefully she'll come back in.
Yeah. Well, and I know she was saying that they now have predominantly federally recognized tribes within the last few years. At one time, there was 5 tribes that received federal recognition. And so I don't know where she was going with that, but and I'm not going to try to.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Beth, do you want to just repeat that? You froze for a minute.
Oh, no, you can never tell.
You were saying that you had majority federally recognized tribes. You froze.
Okay, yes. So yeah, I think for, it's a different set of circumstances, and we need to have some sort of guiding document. The scary thing is, though, we're dealing with the climate crisis, and, I feel the urgency so much. And so, and I don't have an answer to that, except for, I feel like we need to do everything all the time, all at once. And Donna, would love to speak more and have you come to the team too, and really kind of, I know you've got a wealth of background to bring to this light, because it's going to take all hands on deck.
Well, I'm with you. Just let me know when you need me.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
And we once were under the ocean. We still have shark teeth we find in our rivers. And so if we can learn how it was back in those days, it would be very useful. But of course, those days are long gone.
You just said something right there. Yep. Yeah. Part of what I'm thinking now is, like, how are we going to plan for the next 7 generations? Like, that's the question we have to ask ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have another question here for you, Jocelyn and Beth, from Sarah Duncan. Thank you. I'm working with EBCI high school kids on a citizen science air pollution exposure project. What recommendations do you have for melding Western knowledge with TEK? And if you could tell us what TEK is, it must be, well, I'm not sure.
It's referring to traditional logical knowledge.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So recommendations for melding Western knowledge with TEK with high school students.
Okay. So that's one of the tricky things that we're working on with our project as well, and that's part of my research too, is methods of incorporating. Well, I guess mine is going almost in the opposite direction, is methods of incorporating traditional knowledge into the science that we're doing now. And it's always a little bit tricky. So I guess what I've learned so far is a big part of integrating traditional knowledge is with science is leaning into that knowledge and trusting that knowledge. So I know for like a lot of scientists, it's like live and die by science. This is the way that you do things. And I think, especially for tribal communities, it's a lot easier to trust this traditional knowledge, and a difficult part of integrating these two is really like trusting every piece of knowledge that you have and melding those together. So like in the climate resilience planning efforts, a lot of the traditional knowledge comes from observations of community members or community leaders, and that's like incorporating those into planning efforts. So we used to see these species here, and now we don't see them here anymore. We see them there, and then building your science off of those observations. But I would also be interested in hearing maybe some of your ideas on. I'm also hoping to learn a little more about integrating the two. So I'm not sure, Sarah, if you wanted to share
Sarah, do you want to share
your efforts?
Turn on my camera.
Yep, you're good.
Hi, my name is Sarah Duncan. I am an assistant professor at Western Carolina. We're here on Cherokee lands, so we are trying to continue to develop our relationship with the tribe. Kids there, their asthma rates are about 30%, which is insane. And I'm trained as an air pollution exposure scientist, and I'm trying to use the air beams with kids. We're actually going to be going there tomorrow to the Cherokee Central Schools to just do a little demonstration with them. I've been working with some people out here. There's some really good resources braiding sweetgrass, which I'm actually listening to right now. She's a beautiful, you know her, it seems like, Jocelyn. She does such a great job at melding them together. And then we have Lisa Leffler, who is head of the Native Science Program or Health Center here. I'm forgetting the exact name. So our goal, what we're thinking now, is to use storytelling and open-ended interviews to help us understand exposures better, so that way we can direct our measurements with the kids in that direction, and hopefully better understand exactly what some of the problems are, and if there are any solutions to do them in a culturally responsive way. Thoughts?
I love the storytelling idea.
Yeah, it's been done. There's a paper. I'll send it to you if you're interested. I'm forgetting the author right now. I wasn't planning on speaking, so I don't have anything on deck. But there's a good paper about environmental health and TEK that I read, like, before the pandemic, right? Like.
Yeah, that'd be great for y'all to connect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll write my email.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll turn mine off now.
So I don't see any other questions in the chat. We have one more minute, but if I don't hear anybody speaking up, I want to thank our presenters today. This was really informative, and we don't hear about, I hadn't heard about the project, so I was really glad we were able to bring you in and have you share your work with us. And like I said, we will promote it. And glad Donna was able to join us today, and Sarah, as well as all the other participants. So we're going to go back out, and folks will join another breakout session before we go to our closing speaker, Jeremy Tarr from the governor's office, the governor's climate advisor. So thank you all very much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.